Here now, General David Petraeus, former CIA director and Afghanistan commander. General, did you read that the same way I read that? That sounded like a nuclear threat to me.
Well, it sounded like a very substantial threat. Certainly that can be read into it. But I thought that the president did capture something that is very important at this moment. I was at the Munich Security Conference this past weekend, and not only did we hear enormous determination from President Zelensky, his parliamentary delegation, and various ministers, I also saw unity that I've not seen at a Munich Security Conference among NATO members really since the days of the Cold War, when I was a speechwriter for the Supreme Allied Commander Europe. That Article 5 agreement is the cornerstone for NATO. President Biden has clearly stated that as correct as it is. And an attack on all is an attack on all. So without question, that is a very significant statement in response to a very significant threat. But if I could, Jesse, today I think the takeaway is that the Ukrainians who have rhetorically sounded determined today were determined on the battlefield. Trey captured that very important fight for that airfield just outside Kyiv, where presumably the Russians would have put in more air assault infantry tonight. They will not be able to do that. Reports of very heavy Ukrainian casualties indicate how serious the fighting has been. And I've heard that they have indeed knocked down Russian aircraft. They have taken out Russian tanks. The idea that they would be able to roll to Kyiv in 2 days just is not going to be the case, I don't think. You'll see more of their attempt at shock and awe tonight. Unquestionably, you'll see more forces pushed in tomorrow. But I think what Russians are finding is that this is a vast country, as many of us had pointed out. It's a huge population, and its people are very determined not to come under the Russian boot.
So it's not going as smoothly as you think they thought it would go. Does that have anything to do with the fact that we loaded up the Ukrainians with these javelins, these anti-tank weapons that can really do a lot of serious damage? Have those been effective on the battlefield?
Those are very, very effective weapons. And what's important is they are fire and forget weapons, Jesse. You don't have to keep the crosshairs on the target while the missile is flying toward it. You acquire that target, you launch it, and then you can set it down.
Good.
We've also given them Stinger missiles, and that is undoubtedly, those are among the weapons that probably brought down the Russian helicopters and planes today. So again, I suspect the Russians are not entirely pleased with how this first day has gone, except for the force that has come north out of Crimea, which seems to have progressed pretty rapidly. The other axes of advance they've pursued, they've met pretty determined response. And again, at the end of the day, the Russians can absolutely overwhelm the Ukrainians. They are completely outmatched. But the idea that they would put up such a determined front today, I think, is really quite significant.
So we're hearing reports they're going to encircle the capital. And do you think they're going to try to negotiate some sort of surrender? The president of Ukraine is going to step down? Or do you think it's going to be urban warfare? They search, they hunt for the president, and they either cuff him or they hang him or they put him on trial or whatever. How do you see that playing out?
Well, 190,000 troops sounds like a lot, Jesse, but I can tell you, as having been a division commander in an invasion, and we did take down the regime pretty quickly in Baghdad, but it's much tougher if an insurgency develops. In our case, we really were welcomed. They didn't love Saddam Hussein, the kleptocratic leader. And it was only later, of course, that the insurgency and extremists really took root. In this case, this country is pretty united against the Russians. You heard how the Minister of Interior has handed out 10,000 rifles today and so forth. If you can arm the population and really have them fight these Russian forces, it's going to be a very, very grim battle for them. Again, this is a city of millions of people. And when you strip out all those that are not the infantry, the boots on the ground, you have a much smaller force than that 190,000 would seem to indicate. Counterinsurgency is very, very manpower intensive, which is what they could get involved in pretty quickly, essentially guerrilla warfare. And again, you can encircle a city, but getting into it is going to be a bloody affair.
Will that be the strategy?
There are saboteurs in there. I would imagine. I'm sure that they will try to take him out. You know, they'll have spies in there, saboteurs, and so forth. President Zelensky is quite courageous. I thought that there might be a plan to evacuate him to Lviv in the western part of Ukraine. He apparently is staying in the city, even though, as he announced today, he is target number 1 for the Russians and his family is target number 2.
Yeah, he's a brave man. Will that be the strategy going forward from NATO, from the United States, to plow weaponry under the radar into the country and arm the guerrillas as they resist this occupying force? Because that seems like the move is to just bleed the Russians dry, guerrilla warfare style. Is that what we're going to do?
Well, right now they're in a conventional defense. They are fighting as conventional regular forces. We can't provide anything more to them at this point. We're not going to fly our big wide-bodied C-17 transport planes in there now. We're not going to put them in that airspace. What evolves could be, again, some kind of guerrilla warfare. An awful lot depends on whether the Ukrainians can hang on to a substantial part of the country from which they could launch such operations. But right now, the Ukrainians have what they have, and we did provide dozens of, again, these C-17 loads. Other countries did as well. They've got some capable munitions. The question is really, will it be enough over time to make the Russians really pay a very heavy price? And can the Ukrainians continue the kind of determined resistance that we saw from them today? Keep in mind, the Russians right now probably that are in the country, they're trying to refuel. They're trying to get some sleep. Many of them will have been driving all day long in tanks and other armored vehicles. And if the Ukrainians can keep the pressure on them, this is going to be a miserable offensive for them. But that's a big if, and we'll see how this plays out tomorrow after what will be presumably be very heavy bombing and rocket attacks in the early morning hours there today.
General David Petraeus, thank you so much for joining Jesse Watters Primetime.
Thanks, Jesse.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.